we do have to understand it's important to teach boys like it's okay to express your emotions and feelings. We have to not hold these like strict views in terms of like what's masculine versus feminine. And I saw this post a couple of days ago, and obviously, for many of us, like the idea about like what types of toys your kids play with is not new.
Yeah.
But I think, the idea about a boy having a kitchen
Yeah, I
net
saw that.
set, like maybe he'll grow up to like be a chef or something. Like
That's
it's
what I was saying.
crazy.
That's the same exact thing I was saying. It's like whether you were in your 3 or 4, your 5-star restaurants or so, there may be a chef or a sous chef back there, and he's just whipping it up, and you're enjoying every flavor of what you're eating. And so if he has it in his mind as a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, hey, God bless him. I'm
Yeah,
waiting to eat. That's how I look at it.
absolutely. Yeah.
Join me every Tuesday on Clubhouse to discuss further on today's topic, and catch me every Thursday live on YouTube, IG, and Facebook. What a pre-show of the next show. All right, back to the show. A couple of weeks ago, I gave you guys a definition or introduction to delusional disorder. So ladies, I'm going to give you a little bit more about that. Delusional disorder could be the guy who sends you 30 to 40 DMs saying you're lovely, you're beautiful. They're singing to you. They're sending all types of emojis with hearts and kisses. But you've never had a conversation with this person. Right. Thank you for tuning into the Mind of a Man podcast, where Bush Counseling Services definitely works with men who are experiencing and exhibiting delusional disorder. We're charging extra for those. So without further ado, let the manifestation begin. Bartender, cue the music.
Welcome to the Mind of a Man podcast. A podcast where men have manversations on topics they rarely discuss, such as health, family, and wealth, to name a few. Now, here's your host, James Bush.
What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning into the Mind of a Man podcast. My name is James Bush. I am your manversationist. Today, we got a very, very, very special guest. I looked at this guy's webpage. My assistants and my project managers, they found him for me. And I'm like, this guy's put out a lot of work. It kind of reminds me of another guy that I early in my career I used to follow. I'm about to butcher his name, but Juana Kunjunfu. He did a lot of work with minority males, and I was marveled by that because he just spit straight fire, straight facts. Matter of fact, he came to my alma mater,
Okay.
Fisk University, one time to speak, and it was just so enlightening. And so, Dr. Earl, man, welcome to the show. Very glad to have you.
Appreciate the invitation. Excited to be here.
Most definitely. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Earl.
Sure. So I'm a licensed psychologist, and also I teach psychology professor here in Los Angeles, California. As you mentioned, I have a lot of things going on, but I'm also the founder and CEO of Turner Psychological and Consulting Services, which primarily includes addressing mental health in the Black community, but also I do trainings and workshops for professional organizations and state psychological associations around cultural competency and working with individuals from diverse communities. I also host the Breakdown with Dr. Earl, which is a mental health podcast that focuses on issues related to Black boys and men. And then earlier in 2021, I founded Therapy for Black Kids, which is an organization that is geared towards helping parents raise healthy kids in the 21st century. So a lot of things going on.
My goodness. It just, the list goes on. And I guess with COVID, it probably even just ratcheted up a little bit more. Well, Dr. Earl, we're going to take a step back just a little bit with game time. Nice segue.
That's good.
5 questions, random trivia. Get them all 5 right, get some Mind of a Man podcast swag. Get 1 wrong, Dr. Earl, with all your credentials and all your degrees. You know the rest. All right, question number 1. How did Buffalo Bill die?
How did Buffalo Bill die? I don't know. You got me. I'm lost for words.
Kidney failure. Of all things. Wow. No swag for you. Number 2. In the famous, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness, if you get this one wrong, man, they're gonna revoke your California card. In what city would you find the infamous Alcatraz?
Alcatraz is in San Francisco.
All right, Dr. Earl. It's about almost time for you start packing up and you got that one wrong. Question number 3. What chess piece has a horse head?
Gosh, it's been a while since I played chess. Now I'm blanking. No, it's not the pawn. Go ahead and tell me what it is.
Dr. Earl, it's the knight.
It's the knight. Yeah. It's been like years since I played chess.
Okay, that's all right. Question number 4. I know you got this one. Where in your body would you find your hippocampus?
Hippocampus is in the brain.
That is correct. And lastly, question number 5. What historical event is central to the novel A Tale of Two Cities?
Now you're taking me all the way back to like high school.
we had to read that.
That was a long time ago.
Quad reading.
I do not remember.
It is the French Revolution. No worries.
Man.
That's all right. Your California card
ago.
is still intact. You're still good with us, Dr. Earl. All right, let's get into the gauntlet. So, if you haven't been noticing, a lot of us have been in this type of thing called a pandemic for the last almost 2 years, starting to work on it. And there's been a lot of changes. A lot of things have developed. Dr. Earl, you being a specialist in your field, how do we now help kids find normalcy after being out of regular school setting for a year?
Yeah.
They've been virtual for a while. They've been Zooming it.
Right. I think that is a question that we have been like struggling with and trying to figure out the last couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we can like get back to like normalcy, like whatever that means for us. I think we have to really think about how we can move forward from this, because I think the pandemic has changed life for us as we knew it. I don't think we're gonna like go back to how things were before. I think for the education system specifically, really thinking about how can you re-envision education, because I think like at least now I feel like students are going to be very still like overwhelmed by the amount of workload. And I know there was some research that came out a couple of months back that really looked at for at least adolescents, that a lot of them reported, stressors in terms of the amount of work, problems concentrated and focusing. And so I think those things are like, they're not going away just because we sort of went back to school. So I think that kids are still going to have some difficulties with some of those challenges. And so I think trying to understand that those challenges exist, recognizing sort of how mental health impacts performance in school for kids, and trying to make sure that we are able to like get resources in those spaces to help those individuals and families to be able to address those concerns. And for schools to also address that. I'm not a school psychologist, but for my colleagues that do that work, I know it's important that schools think about how they utilize, school psychologists and counselors to help, teachers and staff recognizing kids' challenges with behavioral or academics or related to mental health, because it's always not just like a kid has a learning problem. Sometimes it's their mental health that influences how they may be able to sort of perform or function when it comes to like academics as well.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Dr. Earl, there is no magic pill for this.
There's not. That's the question I get from a lot of my patients. They want that magic pill.
Right. And I think to give them the truth about the matter, is the best thing that we can do, because if you give them something else and it doesn't work, then that just leaves them even more despondent and more saddened, the fact that they're not realizing the outcomes that they want to see.
Right.
In general, we still are in a pandemic. I mean, now we have this new virus of not new virus, but variant that is out there. And there's a scram to get these booster shots. They're still deciding what is safe, what is not safe. You're still seeing things pop off in professional sports leagues as well as other places. And it's just, we are all in, I guess, maybe a maintenance or a holding pattern right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I get it. I get it. It was just like, everyone just hold on. So let's get to the next question. And I want to kind of switch up a little bit, because, again, within the pandemic time period, and even before, there was a lot of civil unrest. There were a lot of things that occurred, especially with people of color, that was somewhat unsavory, to say the least. And it affected our kids. I mean, I've talked to kids about these type of things, and sometimes when they see city officials, law officers, sometimes trepidation does come up because of what they're seeing on network television or in their communities. But Dr. Earl, I want to ask you, how do men have conversations with their young boys about the civil unrest, things such as George Floyd's, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor?
Yeah, no, that's important question. I think, a lot of my work over the last year and a half has really focused on talking with, parents about this, talking with schools about recognizing when kids experience, emotional difficulties as a result of witnessing these types of incidents. And we know it's not going to go away. I mean, I'm in my 40s and this has been going on since before I was, living. So I think we have to sort of recognize that these are difficulties that we unfortunately have to navigate, and that we have to talk to our kids, about this, because if we don't, then they're going to internalize all of these messages and start to hate themselves and sort of be, depressed or even worried, about their parents. And so I think, for fathers and for people that are in the lives of Black boys to really understand, how do we engage in conversations around race and racism with kids is necessary, that we do need to do it early, and also understand that, even if we're not having these sort of direct messages that we're communicating, there are also explicit messages that they can sort of witness that also communicates different things to them as well. So I think for me, the first thing I always tell people and parents is that, you have to understand your own emotions around this and sort of where you are. And so if you're not in a good place emotionally, sort of coping with those things yourself, then it's going to make it very difficult for you to have an open dialogue and conversation with your kids about that. So really, figure out where you are with what emotion you have, even if it's anger, accept it, deal with it. Don't try to hide those things from your kid, but you do want to be able to process it in a sort of a healthy manner. The other piece I think is really important when you talk with boys about this specifically is that you don't want to always focus in on the mistrust with society and with police, but also focus in on sort of the positive things about their identity. Because what we know from the research looking at racial and ethnic socialization is that the types of messages that you communicate to kids is important. And so we obviously know, as Black people, we understand there is going to be this discrimination and this mistrust that people have towards us. And so you want to be mindful about that. But if those are only the messages that you're sending to kids, then that's going to make them more angry and frustrated about society. And so that's going to sort of set them up to also have more difficulties and challenges navigating these experiences, and potentially being, more, I would say, on alert for threat, which then may make them sort of lash out a little bit easier. Obviously, some of that is probably warranted in some situations, but we know that because of the bias and perceptions about Black boys already, then that's just going to put them in different uncomfortable situations that may result in more negative experiences for them, as opposed to sort of helping them get through those situations. So I think you have to be balanced in terms of how do you talk about the bias and discrimination that they may potentially experience in society, but also understanding like what are the things about yourself that are really unique and important, and about, you know, being a Black person in America and the contributions that we've made to this society that can also help them feel hopeful. Because I think, you know, one of the reasons that we're seeing these increases in like depression and suicide among Black boys is that racism exists and we know it exists. And so like if you're always confronted with that, and you're going to become hopeless. And so I think, you know, that's a thing that we have to really address is this, you know, idea about sort of systemic racism and the negative impact that it's having on kids psychologically, and obviously, you know, adults as well.
It's funny when you were talking, the one of the things that hit my mind was the word resilience. And in order to foster sometimes that resilience, you need individuals from the community to bond together to kind of help that person, or help usher or push or motivate that individual, which would in our case be a young African American male or person of color, to move beyond their own limitations and their
Yeah,
own thoughts. Because I guess when kids are impressionable, and so because of that, the littlest thing that they watch, they see, or that is done to them, it can mean a whole matter. Because we
yeah,
we already know about the brain development, and you know, as far as the neurons, and we know about hysteresis at the age of 14 when brain prunes back. So my point being is that we have to, as a community, find some way to kind of help our young men, you know, through this time period, especially when things are very rampant and it's
absolutely.
in your face and it's on your phones, it's on your laptops, it's on your iPads and mobile devices or so. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to do is continue to have the conversation. And when the conversation dies, then that's when I believe some of the dysfunction and the disorders and the uncomfortable moments within these young men's lives does exist.
Yeah, and I think to add to that too, you know, I think a lot of times we just have this perception that kids are going to be resilient because we know, like a lot of research talks about resilience and how, you know, kids can adapt and adjust to things that happen in their life. But resilience isn't innate. Like we have to
Mhm,
do things, you know,
mhm.
to be resilient. So I think, you know, making sure that, you know, for parents to understand like you being present with your child, you having conversations with your child, you doing enjoyable activities with your child, you teaching them about their history. All of those things help to foster resilience. It just doesn't happen.
It's funny because even when you said that, it's that thing resilience, and it's like when you said parents, and it's funny because when I had people come in and they're going through a divorce or they've been through divorce, and the leading statement is kids are resilient, they'll be fine, they'll be all right. Says none ever. Ask that 35 and that 45-year-old adult male whose parents went through a divorce at some point in time and how that affected in their life back then and through their dating phase and young
Yeah,
adult transitioning, emerging adults, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it does play a role. But I think to your point, as you said, you have to be intentional about your efforts.
absolutely.
We're gonna take a quick break, real quick. Mind of a Man podcast.
The Mind of a Man podcast was brought to you by Bush Counselling Services, where we don't merely advise our clients, we accompany them on their journey to realise the life they desired. Look us up at bushcounselingservices.com. That's bushcounselingservices.com.
And we're back with Mind of the Man podcast. So, Dr. Earl, like you, I'm in that 40 age bracket. And life has changed as for males raising other males. Things are different, you know. What we went and experienced a lot when we were coming through elementary and middle school, there's a lot more literature out there about it now as some of our children undergo that. So my question is you, as an expert in your field, is what must men now understand about raising young boys in the 21st century?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question.
Come,
I
well,
think,
well, look,
no, I mean,
I ain't got but so much money, Dr. Earl. So you're gonna have to give me, man, the $5.50 version, or maybe the $20 version.
I mean, so I think, first, there is no perfect answer to that question.
Gotcha.
I think that you do have to, one, understand sort of what your own upbringing contributes to what you think about parenting. Because I think that, as we sort of talked about earlier, sort of what our parents taught us about life, it plays a role in us as well. So like if you were socialized as a kid about like not verbalizing your emotions and feelings, then when you become an adult and you're a parent, like you're going to also potentially hold on to some of those views as well. And so you may also now communicate those things to your child in terms of your sons about, be a man, toughen up, don't talk about your feelings or whatever. And so I think for me, one of the things that I've been talking a lot about, the last couple of years is around sort of masculinity norms and what we think about that. I think for many of us growing up in homes, like we got those messages about, boys don't cry, if you fall and scrape your knee, toughen up, it'll be okay. Or this idea about always winning and being the best, and doing things alone without sort of working as a team and together outside of sports. And so I think that the way that things have changed, we know one, those, I'll say restrictive. I know there's been a lot of conversations talking about like toxic masculinity and toxicity or whatever. I like to use, restrictive. I think when we think about restricting our emotions to a certain set, we know that makes it unhealthy for us because we are innately emotional people biologically. So if you're not able to express the full range of emotions that you experience, then that's going to lead to a lot of different things internally with you, whether it's emotional or health-wise. And we know in terms of like containing frustration and anger, for example, like that leads to increased things like cardiovascular disease or heart risk. And so I think we do have to understand it's important to teach boys like it's okay to express your emotions and feelings. We have to not hold these like strict views in terms of like what's masculine versus feminine. And I saw this post a couple of days ago, and obviously, for many of us, like the idea about like what types of toys your kids play with is not new. But I think, the idea about a boy having a kitchen net set, like maybe he'll grow up to like be a chef or something. Like
that's what I was saying. That's the same exact thing I was saying. It's like whether you were in your 3 or 4 or your 5-star restaurants or so, there may be a chef or a sous chef back there, and man, he's just whipping it up, and you're enjoying every flavor of what you're eating. And so if he has it in his mind as a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, hey, God bless him. I'm waiting to eat. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. So I think, we have to one, I think most parents know very early their kids like personality, and you can see those types of traits. So I always encourage parents like, foster that, support that, like find the things that they love to do that with them, because we know like that relationship that you build with your child early is going to stick with them, throughout the rest of their life. And so that's really important. If you're always telling your kid, like if they, are not into sports or whatever, or using, derogatory terms in terms of like their sexuality, that's not going to help them to grow up to be healthy adults. And that's what we want to do. That's your job as a parent, to help your child to be, a healthy adult. And so I think that's the message that I encourage, men and parents to think about is, what do you want your child to be like as an adult and in relationships? Those are the things that you need to teach them now and foster during their childhood, because those messages are going to translate on into how they interact with people and how they love themselves or not love themselves as an adult.
So right on that topic, right on that last statement, what do you want your children to be in a relationship as an adult? Sometimes I feel that there is so much conflicting information out there, especially by the models, the parents, or from popular society, where sometimes there's a call for men to be more in touch with their feelings, to be more in touch with their emotions. But there's another call from certain parties that says we're looking for traditional values. We're looking for traditional, methods and ways of working relationships. And when I sit back and I think about it, I even think about my own family and some folks that I'm like, grandfather wasn't up there telling you about his emotions and what he thought.
Yeah.
He didn't care about that. What he do? He worked on that farm, he worked on that plant, he went and got that money, and it probably equated to some of them being somewhat of a workaholic, and he probably used to cope with that, maybe some type of alcoholism to some extent, but that's what it was in the end.
Yeah.
And I think as our society continues to learn about this, because we haven't figured it out just yet. I think it's, as you said earlier, it's $1 million question. None of us really truly have the correct answer, right smack dab on the middle. Even in the process of us learning, I think we have to be mindful of the language that we use, because our kids are watching. They're impressionable. They're soaking a lot of this stuff up. And sometimes I feel like I'm just as confused as they are when it comes to these topics. Like, so you want this one way, but you want that the other way. How does that work all together? It's like, where's the balance?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other piece I want to add too, I know we were talking about fathers, but I think that, fathers can send messages to their daughters about certain things, and mothers can send certain messages to their sons as well. So I think, like, one of the conversations I had on my podcast last year was, or maybe it was the season before, I don't know at this point, but I think the conversation was around for mothers and women that sometimes they also are really ingrained in these messages about, these sort of traditional roles. And when men are more expressive or in touch with their emotions, they also can't handle that. And so I think that's another piece that, is also taught throughout society that we have to be mindful of. It's like, how do you want your son to, like, be in a relationship, in terms of heterosexual relationships, with their partners? And those things are important. And I think for me, as someone who's done therapy with couples, like, you have to understand that for some men, they've been taught all of their lives not to talk about their feelings and emotions. But then they get married in relationships and you want them to, like, be present and be emotional. And well, that's not what they've learned for 20, 30 years of their life. So you can't expect that to happen overnight. And so we have to think about that.
The key word you said is you can't expect them to. It's not to say that you just surrender and just say, this is how you are. You'll never change or anything like that. No, we're not saying that. It's that, because as you continue to work, if you have somebody that says, you know what, I'm in this relationship, I understand that this is what I need to do for me and my partner, for us to kind of work together. I'm going to have some type of conversation, things that I probably am not even comfortable with saying elsewhere or anything, or I've never had to say.
Yeah.
It's not saying that you're abandoning that option. It can get better. You just got to work at it. But knowing these things on the forefront, I think what it does is it can possibly usher in more grace, more patience in the early stages, as opposed to contempt and conflict that comes along with that, because that this is going to be a process. Just like, when you go and you whip up those box cakes in about 30 to 45 minutes, you're going to have a cake of some sort. You're patient. You're waiting for it. You don't just go put the cake in the oven and then 2 minutes later say, okay, I'm waiting for it to be done. No. It doesn't work like that. You already have it in your mind. You've been programmed. You have accepted, and that's the key word, accepted, that it's going to take them some time to exercise this new skill, to use this muscle that they probably never used before. But when they get it, how effective your relationship will be.
That's it.
Definitely. Well, Dr. Earl, I know you're a busy man. I don't want to keep you too long. Tell my audience, where can they find you at? Where can they even see your podcast? And I know it's got some gems in there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can check the podcast out. It's on all streaming platforms. The Breakdown with Dr. Earl. Also, you can check out my Instagram pages. So the podcast, The Breakdown with Dr. Earl. You can also follow my personal page at Dr. Earl Turner. And you can connect with me on all social platforms at that handle.
Man, once again, Dr. Earl, appreciate you dropping by. Keep doing the good work. Like I said, it just, when I saw you, that's just like Zhuangzi Kunjufu. I mean, it's just, I probably butchered his name, but I know the guy because I mean, I've seen so many of his videos on YouTube and him just, I'll say this. For me, he was the Stephen A. Smith before Stephen A. Smith. He dropped gems. He had facts. He had data. He talked about African Americans and Black boys being in schools, the settings, who they were, how they were conditioned, what the school settings were made for. And I'm like, and you start to look at it and you just say, man, it was created for females because young men are more active. They have more testosterone. They like to get up. They receive education information more in an active state, in an active setting. And so we need what you're doing. Keep doing it.
Appreciate that. Excited to share.
Most definitely. All right. What's burning on the bushes next?
Shout out to Dr. Earl. Very dope episode. I'm not going to recap the whole thing because you guys just watched it. But I do want to leave you with this, especially at the end of the year. I know a lot of us, as far as males, we out there grinding, getting money, get paid, young brother, get paid. Shout out to Young Dog. Rest in peace. But at the same time, one of the best investments that we can do is invest in our children. A lot of that is time. Giving them the time. Giving them that resource. Helping them understand the different nuances of life. I think that's so important. Are things different? Yes. It's a different age block or gap or whatever you want to call it from when we were kids to where they are now. So take the time and learn about it. See if you can find each day, an hour, 30 minutes. Do something with them. We have phones now. Engage with them. Be present. I think that's so important in this time and space. A lot of times, generations don't translate well to other generations because of lack of preparation. Catch that. So fellas, I'm charging you, as well as myself, Jesus, invest in your children. Spend more time, listen, learn about the things they like to. And then also show them some stuff that they don't know about, because guess what? They don't know. All right? Once again, shout out to Dr. Earl. I told you dude was dope. He's got more publications and credentials than a little bit. If, by chance, you want to check me or you have any additional information to add to this conversation, put it in comments below. Comments. This is early. Put it in the comments below. I'd definitely like to hear from you. All right? Word for the day. There is no word for the day. Take care.